let's get to some of the spring objectives. Of course, they hit the field for the first time on March 11th. There's a spring game coming up on the 20th of April. So the roster came out. Has there been a depth chart released?
There has not been a depth chart release, and that's not usually something they do in the spring. Typically at Oklahoma, that'll wait until the week of the very first game in the fall. So it probably won't be until the final week of August that we get a depth chart. But understandably, you bring back 9 of 11 starters on defense. I think everybody has a pretty good idea of what the depth chart is going to look like defensively. On the offensive side, obviously, there's a lot that's up in the air between how crowded that receiver room is, how crowded that backfield is, and also how much uncertainty there is as to which 5 guys make up the permutation that Bill Bedenbaugh is going to roll out on the offensive line.
Parker, I saw a list of additions and subtractions in regards to guys' sizes. Those goals have to be met in regards to you need to get bigger, you need to get, you need to get a little bit leaner. And that's a conversation, of course, we've had with you a number of times since Brent Venables has taken over the program. It's about strength and conditioning. Anyone notable there?
I mean, there have been a lot of notable gains and losses, or lack of gains and lack of losses, for instance. The ones that spring to mind immediately, obviously, a lot of the young freshmen put on good weight. David Stone, the 5-star from Del City, Oklahoma, up into the 285 range. I believe he played the All-American game in Orlando at about 275, so already 10 pounds of muscle on that guy. Jaden Jackson, the 4-star signee from originally from the state of Indiana, I believe, played at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. He went from 279 to 297. So somebody that's definitely, by the time the season rolls around, going to be cut out to play a 0 tech, but is also going to be able to slide over to a 3 in the Oklahoma defense, and somebody who is very much expected to be, at the very least, a rotational piece right off the bat. The one guy that everybody was kind of, I guess, alarmed is maybe too severe a word, but concerned that he didn't put on weight would be former 5-star edge rusher PJ Adibawara, who's going into his second year as a Sooner. Made a play here, a play there as a true freshman in the rotation last year, but expectations are sky high for him, understandably, going into his sophomore year. When he got to Oklahoma last spring as an early enrollee true freshman, he was 6'4", 238. Brent Venables said in an interview about a month ago they'd like to have him in the 260 neighborhood by the time the season starts off, and he checked in for spring weigh-ins at 6'4", 241. So some work to be done in that department. But really everybody across the board, it's not terribly substantial. Not everybody put on 20 pounds like Jaden Jackson did, but you see a lot of added muscle mass for a lot of these guys. In comparison to their listing last year, or their listing as high schoolers, 6 pounds here, 8 pounds there. And that's generally what you can expect at Oklahoma when you jump into Jerry Schmidt's workout program. He's going to pack muscle on you.
I'm jealous of the edge rusher because those days are long gone for me, unfortunately, where you can just do anything you want. And it's just not going to be a higher weight on the scale. It's difficult for me to find a team across the country, Parker, not that I've made this an exercise, to find a team that does not have an experienced starting quarterback, but also does not have a quarterback competition per se, or a strong battle there that can be waged. This is Jackson Arnold's team, but there's still got to be that not concern, but that anticipation that he has to get better. He has to show that he's ready for SEC defenses.
Oh, absolutely. There's a ton riding on Jackson Arnold's shoulders this fall, because I think the expectation here in Oklahoma is that, well, the defense is going to more than hold their own, right? We talked about it. 9 of 11 starters coming back, including 2 guys that are going to be in the All-American conversation, in linebacker Danny Stutzman and safety Billy Bowman. So expectations for the defense are that they're going to continue to take steps toward what we have come to know Brent Venables' defenses as in the past. And those are nationally elite units, right? And so offensively, yes, there's a lot of turnover on the offensive line. Bill Bedenbaugh is going to have to come up with a completely new lineup after he lost all 5 starters. But there's a reason he's one of the highest paid offensive line coaches in the country. Whatever hand he's been dealt over the years at Oklahoma, he's been able to make the best of it. And offensive line play has never been subpar in his decade plus at the University of Oklahoma. It hasn't always been elite necessarily, but it definitely has always been above average. So not a ton of concern there. You look at the wide receiver room, it's deep, it's talented. The backfield, same story. And so the age-old predicament that Oklahoma faces is, okay, like what happens if Jackson Arnold doesn't live up to expectations? Because that's really the only thing I think that's going to derail this offense, is if Jackson Arnold isn't all that he's cracked up to be. Now, I will say this. The Sooners brought in Casey Thompson, who's been around the yard a time or two. Spent time at Texas, spent time at Nebraska, most recently spent a year at Florida Atlantic. He's going into his 7th year of college football. He's a guy that led the Big 12 in touchdown passes in 2021. So if, God forbid, this whole thing just burns to the ground with Jackson Arnold as the starter, you do have a guy with plenty of starting experience sitting there on the bench that's going to be able to come in and put out the fire. You also have a very talented true freshman in Michael Hawkins, who was a 5-star signee out of the state of Texas. Legacy kid. His dad played cornerback at Oklahoma in the early 2000s, and returns have been very strong on him. Very strong throughout spring ball. So I don't think it's as simple as, okay, either Jackson Arnold booms or this offense kind of fizzles. But obviously, everybody understands this is his team. He is the unquestioned starter, and he's going to need to play good ball if the Sooners want to win double-digit games in the SEC. Sure, I guess theoretically you can make do with Thompson or Hawkins, but that's gonna leave fans very unsettled if midseason you're mixing and matching at the quarterback position, trying to figure out a problem that you weren't anticipating would exist. But all told, look, Arnold had some good, he had some bad in that one Alamo Bowl start versus Arizona. Everything I've heard from within during spring ball is that he's really taken a step up in terms of leadership and just overall cognitive precision. And so the worry level is not high, but obviously you're moving into the most competitive league in the country, and you don't really have conspicuous holes anywhere on the roster. There is a lot of pressure on the quarterback to do what needs to be done. And so I don't know that there is a single player on the team that is facing more pressure than Jackson Arnold in 2024, not necessarily because there's uncertainty as to how he's going to perform, but just because he is a first-year starting quarterback for a blue blood program in their first year in the best conference in America, and there are expectations that naturally come attached to that.
Well, thank you for the reminder, Parker, because that was a somewhat faulty setup on the quarterback position, because I forgot about Casey Thompson being there. So there's a security blanket there, no question. All right, we got Parker Thune here. Parker, best ways to find you, and of course, lock in on your daily show.
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at Parker Thune. Download the KREF app if you're a Sooner fan and you want Sooner talk all day, every day. 12 hours of live programming, all Sooner-centric, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. every single weekday. Or you can go to kref.com. If you're in the Oklahoma area, you can listen on 1400 AM, 99.3 FM. There are a variety of ways that you can get KREF programming, but the easiest and most unilaterally effective way is just to download the KREF app. I am on air every day from 12 to 3 p.m. Central Time.
Awesome. Well, you had said that the most likely way that there's an issue on offense is, of course, if Jackson Arnold falters. But then you mentioned the 5 new offensive linemen, so no real concern there. What's the level of talent and experience individually there?
So admittedly, I think there is some concern. It's not something that you're wringing your hands over. I think if you're an Oklahoma fan, just they've got some very talented youngsters that have yet to move into full-time starting roles. Jake Taylor is going into his redshirt sophomore year, was a 4-star top 200 overall prospect in the 2022 class. Heath Ozida, similar story. He comes all the way from Snoqualmie, Washington, redshirt freshman, and he's probably the offensive lineman that I've heard the most good buzz about thus far in spring. And they bring in a very strong crop of transfers as well. Fabichi Wewu from North Texas, former walk-on there who just, I mean, he showed up and he crushed it at North Texas, went well above and beyond any of the expectations that anybody had for him as a walk-on from Coppell, Texas at UNT, jumps in the transfer portal this offseason, ends up at Oklahoma, reunites with former North Texas head coach and current offensive coordinator at Oklahoma, Seth Luttrell. And the word on him is he might be the absolute strongest player on the team, the most physically imposing player on the entire offensive line. They brought in Michael Tarquin, who's got starting experience at right guard for Florida and at right tackle this past year for USC. Garen Hatchett broke camp as a starter before encountering an injury, broke camp as a starter on Washington's Joe Moore Award winning offensive line this past year. So that's another valuable addition via the portal. They brought in Troy Everett last spring from Appalachian State, won a very hotly contested recruiting battle with Virginia Tech for his services. And in his case, he was a guy that started a bit here and there, was kind of the jam guy, if you will. He was the sixth man on that offensive line last year. He would get a start here and a start there when they really needed to fill a hole. But somebody that was a freshman All-American at Appalachian State, so he's proven he can do it, and he's more than likely going to at least open camp in the fall as the Sooners starting center. So I guess the overarching point there is the answers are there. Not to mention, you got a couple of very talented true freshmen in Eddie Pierre-Louis, Daniel Akinkumi, who can give you snaps on the interior if you need them to. The answers are there for Oklahoma. It's just a matter of, okay, what does the exact lineup look like? The starting left tackle is expected to be Jacob Sexton, who, again, is a guy that has starting experience at Oklahoma. Wasn't a full-time starter last year because OU happened to have a first-round draft pick playing left tackle in Tyler Guyton. Or I'm sorry, right tackle. So Sexton's going to move into a full-time starting role. Expectations are very, very high for him as far as the other four positions across the board. Yeah, it's anybody's game right now. There's going to be healthy competition, and there's not a clear answer right now as to what that starting five looks like, but the answers are no doubt there on the roster.
Parker Thune, KREF Sports, Monday through Friday, noon to 3 Central Time. You can catch him on OU Insider on Rivals as well. Is there a handful of players on either side of the ball that you find to be a little bit more intriguing in following their spring progress than others?
Well, I guess when you say intriguing, what exactly do you mean?
Whether that's a guy with big talent who has yet to break through, who needs to, or just an interesting storyline surrounding any particular guy.
Yeah, I think it's got to be the wide receiver room right now. And I think the guy that's been talked about the most, period, not just among wide receivers, but across the entire roster, is Purdue transfer Dion Burks, who kind of flew under the radar, but is absolutely one of the most impactful transfer portal additions for any team in the country in this past portal cycle. He led Purdue in every major receiving category this past year. And that obviously, Mark, was not a prolific Purdue offense. And so the numbers that he was able to put up in that offense as a threat at all three levels speaks to how high his ceiling is in an offense like Oklahoma's, where it's not going to be all on his shoulders. And man, the amount of folks, and you don't even have to solicit this stuff from people, but I'll get on the phone with folks inside the Switzer Center at Oklahoma, folks that are privy to the practice sessions during the week more often than not, and they'll tell me organically, no prompts whatsoever, hey, that dude Dion Burks, he is the real deal. He is the truth. And so everybody is incredibly impressed with what he's brought to the table thus far at Oklahoma and what he has the potential to do operating from Drake Stoops' former post in the slot this coming season. Obviously, Oklahoma brings back Nick Anderson on the outside. They bring back Jalil Farouk. They bring back Andrell Anthony, who led the team in every receiving category over the first half of the season until he succumbed to a season-ending injury in that Texas game. Brennan Thompson is a guy that really came on strong at the end of last season. Speed, and more speed. He's only 5'10", about 160 pounds, but ran a 10.18 100-meter dash as a junior in high school. So that gives you some context for just how fast he is. Absolutely one of the fastest players in the entire country. Jaden Gibson, all 6'5" of him, has really taken a step up from everything I've heard. And then you got Jaquez Petaway, who was a former top 100 recruit in the country in the 2023 cycle. Made plays when he was asked to, which wasn't often. Last year, he was operating mainly in mop-up duty, and he would get sporadic snaps here and there in conference play. But the Sooners are at minimum 7, 8 deep in the wide receiver room with guys that are capable of being key contributors in a Power 4 offense. And so the question becomes, well, how do you accommodate all of these guys? And I think the harsh reality is you don't, right? There's going to be at least a guy or two that kind of feels disenfranchised at season's end because he didn't get the number of targets, the number of opportunities he was looking for. But from where Oklahoma sits, and with Emmett Jones, the second-year wide receivers coach in charge of that room, those are the type of problems you like to have, right? Those are first world problems. You'll take those.
Yeah, Dion Burks had to make the adjustment from an Aiden O'Connell led at the quarterback position offense 2 years prior. Jeff Brom, one of the best offensive minds in the game, to Ryan Walters, first-year head coach, very defensive-minded guy as a DC. New quarterback Hudson Card, one of the Oklahoma fans' favorites, I'm sure. But that was Dion Burks' adjustment from 2022 to 23.